Hello Commander community, I'm Paul the Commander Theorist, and I'd like to welcome you to another Magic the Gathering video. Today, we're going to be diving into another exciting Commander Theorem, spotlighting a legendary creature from the Commander 2018 Precon deck, Adaptive Enchantment. Today, we explore Tuvasa the Sunlit. Tuvasa the Sunlit is a 3-mana Merfolk Shaman. She gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and whenever you cast your first enchantment spell for the turn, you get to draw a card. So, a number of things are going on with this creature. For starters, we do finally have a Bant-colored Merfolk legend, so in theory, a Merfolk tribal deck could be built using Tuvasa at the helm. However, she does nothing to support the tribe, so for now, she would simply serve as a functional placeholder for the deck. Her ability to gain power and toughness for the number of enchantments you control is also incredibly strong, allowing herself to be a potential enchantment-based Voltron build. But that's not quite what we're going to be theorizing today. The deck we're going to be discussing in this video is none other than Tuvasa Enchantresses. The Enchantresses are a series of cards in green and white that'll give you a card draw for each enchantment spell you cast. Tuvasa herself is in a sense an Enchantress, albeit a watered down version, because she only gives you one card draw per turn. But what puts her into the running as our commander today is her giving access to blue magic to a already established Enchantress build. And while the other two legends from the Adaptive Enchantment deck both offer us a similar strategy that cares about enchantments, none of them offer us the type of Enchantress build that Tuvasa will support. So this deck is going to be wanting to do a few main things, so do keep these in mind as we explore what the rest of the deck contains. We want to run a few hate enchantments that will shut down opponents' ability to play effectively. We run a series of Pillow Fort style cards that will keep much of the heat off of us, encouraging the other players at the table to fight among themselves. The other thing we have going for us is a powerful engine of card advantage. Repeated and intense levels of card draw, ramp, and synergy among our spells makes this deck incredibly powerful. Now, one last disclaimer is that in building the deck for this theorem, I did heavily base it off of an already existing deck I run. A few months ago, I had covered Miri the Weatherlight Duelist, which also was an Enchantress style build, albeit in a Selesnya colors. This deck was actually based off of the Karametra Enchantress deck run by Melissa DeTora during her appearance on Game Nights. The deck is powerful, resilient, and rather consistent, which is a word I really don't use much when talking Commander. It has the ability to go off in a big way with little room to wiggle by opponents. With the addition of blue, we get access to a few truly dangerous additions to the deck. Shall we? So I'm going to begin with the namesake cards of this build, the Enchantresses. These cards are a series primarily in green, and they give you a card draw for each enchantment you cast. Argothian Enchantress costs the least to play at just 2 mana. She also has Shroud, making her an excellent early game play. You'll also note that many of these Enchantresses cards are often very small. They really don't have the power to make them viable in combat, but the value that you get from them is often found by simply sitting them on the battlefield and existing to draw you cards. Eidolon of Blossoms costs the most at 4 mana, but it also has a slightly different ability. Rather than just being triggered upon the casting of enchantments, the Eidolon triggers whenever an enchantment, or itself, which is also another enchantment, enters the battlefield. So not only does it replace itself in your hand, but it also takes into account instances when an enchantment enters the battlefield, such as when they are either blinked or created. Satyr Enchantment is the newest addition to the Enchantress family, being both green and white. Verduran Enchantress and its color-shifted twin Mesa Enchantress are both 3-drops, and they each give a card draw whenever you cast an enchantment. And lastly, we do run an Enchantment Enchantress, the Enchantress's Presence. That's a tongue twister. These 6 cards offer you card draw for your enchantment playing, and given the build we have today containing a total of 39 enchantments, we have a lot of card draw in this deck. Now let's explore the enchantment package this deck contains. This is obviously where the bulk of our deck's gameplay rests, and many of these are crucial to our strategy. I'm going to begin with the hate enchantments, the ones focused on slowing down your opponents and keeping the heat off of you. Aura of Silence causes artifacts and enchantments that are not yours to cost 2 extra mana to play, and you can sacrifice it at instant speed to destroy target artifact or enchantment. The both of these are excellent uses, and this can really hurt coming out early on before any Soul Rings try to pop out. Aura Shards takes advantage of a card that we're going to discuss later on, and it utilizes the creatures that we produce to destroy any pesky artifacts or enchantments. Also, please note that this card does say you may destroy, so if you have no more targets that you want to remove, you can simply pass on the ability. Authority of the Consuls is a nice little life gain enchantment, and it taps down opponents' creatures as they enter the battlefield. This is a great early game card to play, as it seriously hinders the defending player's ability to block us. Can't block me with your nice new assortment of creatures if they're all tapped now, can you? Blind Obedience is a very nifty little toy, again forcing opponents' creatures and their artifacts to enter play tapped. It also has Extort, and I especially want to mention this because of all the cards I've ever used in Commander Brewing, this is the one that has gotten me the most amount of flack. Many players see that in the Extort ability's reminder text it is a hybrid black-white mana symbol, and they're confused as to why it's included in a deck that does not run black. This is understandable, and while yes, you are not allowed to run cards that have black mana symbols in their text box in a deck that does not have black in its commander's color identity. But because it is in reminder text, it is not affecting the color identity of Blind Obedience. Blind Obedience's color identity is mono white. If this card were printed without its reminder text, as many cards eventually are, it would have no mana symbols in its text box to affect its color identity. But because the Extort mechanic is not quite an evergreen ability and is a reprint from a set that was Extort's sole appearance, its reprints will often carry that reminder text to inform players unfamiliar with the mechanic, just hoping to clear that up for some players. Everwatching Threshold is a new card from Commander 2018, and it gives you card draw whenever an opponent decides to attack you or a Planeswalker you control. This is an excellent deterrent, as you will already be drawing plenty of cards through your Enchantress engine, and would your opponents really want to contribute to that by attacking you? Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and the upgraded version, Sphere of Safety, all come in this deck as Pillow Fort cards, protecting you further from attacks. Karmic Justice lets you destroy a target permanent an opponent controls whenever they try to target a non-creature permanent you control to destroy. So in this deck, whenever they try to take out an enchantment of yours, you get to blow up something of theirs. And you can go after their lands. Quarantine Field is a very savage removal spell, and while we do run a number of other spells similar to this, the field has the largest area of effect potential. Its double X cost might seem intimidating, but given the ramp that this deck can pull off, you'll be fine. This is great for taking out any line of defense the opponent's fields have, or clearing the board of a variety of threats. Do note that the permanents that are all targeted, they are all targeted and removed at the same time. So if an opponent has something in play that protects their other permanents from being targeted, you won't be able to target the first permanent and then, since this one's gone now, target the others. It all has to happen at once. Rhystic Study is my favorite card draw in this deck, putting opponents on the spot to either give you extra card draw or tax themselves a little extra for every spell they want to play. And it's often important and useful to find a way to remind yourself of all the triggers for this card so as not to forget and miss out on 8 or 9 card draw triggers. Stasis Snare is excellent removal for creatures, as it having flash lets you use it whenever you can play an instant. This is great to hold up in the event of something threatening hitting the board before you can react to it. Stony Silence is an arrow to the knee for many decks running a lot of mana rocks. It literally shuts them off entirely. Our only artifact in the deck is Soul Rings, so rarely will this card impact us. But it turns off mana rocks, a lot of artifact creatures, and that on its own can cripple strategies. Aegis of the Gods gives us hexproof. It's a very simple effect, but it's a very potent effect. Yes, this is a little fragile at having 1 toughness, but in my experience with playing it, I often find that I'll have other threats on the board that present greater threats that opponents will want to have to remove, rather than worrying about my little hexproof guy to target them. We also have the power of the gods on our side. 3 of the gods from Theros appear in this deck. Heliod is a powerhouse, giving our whole board vigilance, and giving us a little mana sink to create enchantment creature tokens. This ability will trigger the Eidolon of Blossoms, as we are not casting but creating enchantments, and the Eidolon does trigger upon entering the battlefield. Karametra, the retired commander of this deck, is extremely potent ramp, letting us snag a forest or a plains card with every creature we cast. And do note that this only cares about it being a forest or a plains, so non-basic lands are searchable with this. And lastly, Nilia, God of the Hunt, gives trample to our board, and it can be another mana sink to pump our team. So that is the bulk of our enchantment base, the key ones anyway, that'll help us handle opponents' boards while developing our own. But how does this deck win? Let's explore some win conditions that we run. The biggest threat in our deck, I feel, is the Sigil of the Empty Throne. With each enchantment that we cast, we get a 4/4 Flying Angel token. With the amount of low-costed enchantments that we run, one turn can churn out a sizable army of tokens to reduce our opponents to dust. The Luminarch Ascension does this as well, the creating tokens part at least. If you cast this early, you should have no problem collecting the 4 needed quest counters on it. Then, for every 2 mana you can afford, you get a 4/4 Flying Angel. We also have a way to weaponize our enchantments. See, normally they just sit there, chilling on the field, doing little other than whatever it is they do. But with 2 cards in this deck, Opalescence and the Starfield of Nyx, we can transform our enchantments to be enchantment creatures. Their power is then equal to their CMC. Suddenly, you can have your whole army of enchantment creatures swing in for the kill. We also have a few cards that offer us a little bit of defense when opponents are trying to do their thing. Dragonlord Jamoka and Grand Abolisher both protect you while it's your turn from opponents doing anything, and this can be very helpful when you're trying to go off. Sigarda, the Host of Herons, protects you from Edict or Sacrifice effects. The dreaded Cyclonic Rift can come out and entirely wipe boards clean for you to march to victory. And of course, Teferi's Protection can be a great last-ditch effort to avoid being hit by an opponent. Now, this deck is very powerful. Enchantments are historically the hardest permanent type to remove in Commander, as black and red have nearly no way of handling them, let alone in mass. Having such a strong basis for the defense enchantments can make it so that your opponents, they're going to have to expend a lot more resources to work on removing your shields. All while this is going on, you can consistently be building up more and more, all the while generating immense value from the cards you play. It's also important to understand the interactions between your cards. Should you end up playing into someone else's board wipe while your enchantments are all creatures, you do have the ability to evade it by destroying whatever's making them into creatures using something like the Aura of Silence or Seal of Cleansing. The more you understand how the interactions between these cards in your deck can work, the more skilled you'll be when piloting it and know all the maneuvers available to you. Tuvasa, in a rather different stance than my usual take on a commander deck, she takes a very passive role as commander, simply existing on the field to give card draw and function as part of the engine. In the end, if she does manage to become immense from the mass of enchantments, she can easily swing in to perhaps take out an opponent with commander damage. But I find this is very unnecessary most of the time. She doesn't have evasion or any combat ability to get damage through unless Nilia is on the board. Otherwise, I find her to be a very fun, powerful commander who brings a very potent deck to the table, and she's definitely going into my main roster. And that is going to wrap up this Commander Theorem. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this video looking at the powerful Tuvasa, and if you did, please hit that like button. You'll help the channel out immensely, and you'll let others know that this video is worth a watch. If you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button and maybe ringing the little bell icon so you'll get a notification whenever I upload next. If you'd like to help the channel up the quality of our video, and perhaps be able to create live action video, we do have a Patreon where you can support our work. Every little bit of support from this wonderful fellowship of Commander enthusiasts is always appreciated. Whether it's your liking or sharing the videos, simply leaving a comment, or subscribing to the channel, you all are the best. I thank you for your time spent with us here today, and again, I'm Paul the Commander Theorist, and I'll see all you guys, gals, and non-binary pals in the next video.